Johnny, can he come back to school?
Oh, well, of course he can. Now what's everybody standing around for? After all, this is a prom! Magic surrounds us. Don't you see?
I glimpsed white pillows against a lavender wall, then a woman's head and some of her shoulders. It didn't look real, as if someone had propped a fake head against the pillows. From about the collarbones down, there was only red ruin. I don't mean a body. I mean it was as if the bed had been dipped in dark fluid. The blood wasn't red. It was black. A trick of the light, or the fact that it wasn't just blood. The smell hit me then. Meat. Everything smelled like hamburger. I saw the pile of bedclothes, black and red and sodden, soaked in gore. I looked back at the woman's head. I didn't want to, but I couldn't help it. I looked, and I finally could see. It was all that was left of an adult woman. It was as if she'd exploded with her head on the pillows and her body everywhere. So, if nothing else, this is the one glimmering needle in the filthy haystack of this book. This is what this story should have been about, since clearly a plot driven by Anita's relationships isn't producing anything worthwhile. It seems that a werewolf did this, and Anita ends up running out to puke in the hall and pass out. Anita wakes up to find Tammy taking care of her with a cold compress, which apparently makes her sick because she feels like a lycanthrope now. She tells us that meant that my temperature ran hot when I was sick. I just want to point out that one little fact that we all know. Human temperatures run high when we're sick, too. I know she probably meant to imply that lycanthrope temperatures run higher than human temperatures, but Anita simply comes across as dim. A sentence rewrite could have fixed this. Now, I'm adding this part in more for hilarity's sake, since it seems to have nothing to do with moving the story forward. But Anita tells us that the followers of the way, the Christian witches, are more Christian than the right-wingers. That's right, Christian zealot witches. And this one happens to be pregnant. And she blames it on her doctor for prescribing her an antibiotic that stops her pill from working and not telling her that. Which seems a little contrived, since usually your doctor asks you what meds you're currently on before prescribing you a new one. But it's all just a setup so that Tammy can believe that Anita is pregnant too, because they're the only ones to have both thrown up and passed out. Tammy absolutely refuses to believe that Anita isn't pregnant and gets super pissy about it. Jason finally shows up to take Anita home. She passes out in the Jeep. Actually, a lot of the chapters in this section of the book end with Anita passing out. It gets really annoying. It was around this time that I realized that all of Anita's boyfriends are described as looking like women. It's one step beyond pretty boy. One of them is even described as having a woman's face. After a painfully detailed description of Mika, he's the real boyfriend, remember? Yeah, I have trouble remembering too. Their beasts have some kind of mystical merging sex, and that somehow triggers a vision of what's been making Anita sick all day. The shadow of Belmort's power that had been trying to leech life from Jean-Claude all day. But since Jean-Claude is a master vampire, Anita and Richard, who is his beast to call or something like that, get drained instead. Anita and Mika chase Belle away with their beasts, and then call the circus to have their vampire visitors put under cross and lock. Then, Anita angsts about Richard. After some more sleepy time for Anita, the wereleopards come in and cause quite a stir. And at one point, the female leopard's dialogue is followed with,
"She made it half a question."
just how did she manage to do that? I'm not even sure I want to know. Anita gets left to fall asleep with the leopard she caused to pass out. In her dream, she meets Belle, who rolls the yard door over her, so she wakes up needing to feed. Exit the leopard, enter the wolf. What follows is...
Ew, get me out of here. Do not want... That is dubious consent.
And what do they talk about afterward? The size of Jason's wang. I am 100% serious here. The conversation implies that the vampires have monster wangs. I was honestly afraid while reading that. I wrote in my notes, "Shut up, no more, plot now, please." And I don't even know how many pages into the conversation that was anymore. The only thing that could possibly justify this conversation being in the book is that Anita makes it clear that mommy and commitment issues are her middle name. But I think we were starting to get the idea anyway. At this point, we've reached chapter 25 and are closing in on page 200. Not nearly close to the end. So I started only noting what seemed to be actual plot points and the best samples of awful writing. Anita takes a shower, but some of the werewolves come in carrying a nearly dead Richard, and she grudgingly gives up the shower to save his life. She angsts about it, and then gets a phone call from the other cop working on the murder case, Zabrowski. She packs a bag so she doesn't have to come back to the house, because of Richard being there. Mika sends her a bodyguard who she doesn't like very much, and who isn't very bodyguard-like. Then we get to hear the bard rolling in his grave, as Anita thinks,
If you throw the furry through a windshield, do they not still bleed?
Belmort pulls some telepathy trick, wanting Anita to feed her. Anita likes to describe Belle's voice as contralto, which isn't invalid, but I don't know why she wouldn't just go with tenor. It's a much less complicated term, and I really don't know why Anita knows enough to know the difference between contralto and tenor. This time she gets the bloodlust, but Belle and Anita have a power struggle. It seems that Belle is obsessed with owning Anita. At this point, I guessed that this was supposed to be the main plot. And I wasn't entirely wrong. Though there's enough going on to be confusing, and really the murder plot is more interesting. Suddenly, they realize they're being followed. In trying to figure out who is following them, Anita monologues extensively about what a rainfield is, only to then have the bodyguard, who Mika sent for her, ask what a rainfield is. So literally, what's written is this.
I explained what a rainfield was.
What? The only reason to have a character ask what a rainfield is would be to explain it to the reader. The dialogue would have been a stronger choice here. It would have forced the explanation to be much less rambling. Honestly, this is just ridiculous. In a semi-dream state, Anita and Belle have a close encounter with the Mother of All Darkness, who is both vampire and lycanthrope, which baffles Anita since, as far as she knows, you can't be both. I guess she never read all that lore that says that vampires and werewolves have a common origin. Anita comes across the Mother of All Darkness sleeping and proceeds to tell us that she
Moved the way someone will when they dream, but are not yet awake.
Yes, most dreams tend to happen while not awake. Anita seems to have special snowflaked her way into the interests of the mother of all darkness. She beats back her presence with a cross and consciously returns to the car, which may or may not be being followed as they lose the car, pick it back up, and lose it again. So they can finally go to the circus, as Anita changes the hunger she's getting from Richard into the ardor. She races through the circus to get to Jean-Claude, but when she gets there, he's just woken up and has no blood in his body. You can see where this is going, right? I don't have to explain it to you, because I won't. Jean-Claude won't feed off Anita, no matter how much she begs, because he knows how much she hates it and won't do it willingly. However, the scene goes on to need a censor anyway. In the most disgusting and unerotic thing, Anita manages to feed the ardor anyway. Thinking of how Jason needled her about her commitment issues earlier, Anita still offers Jean-Claude her neck. But he gets pissy about a cross she's wearing. And when Asher comes in, it starts to glow. Everybody seems to get really pissed off really quickly. But it takes a while for us to find out that apparently Asher no-holds-barred rolled Anita's mind. I have no idea what that means, not in the least, but Anita doesn't seem to take kindly to her mind apparently being screwed with, which really pisses Asher off because he didn't know the rules and he didn't want to play by those rules anyway. So he storms out, and that gives Jean-Claude the hump. After all of that, the were-rat, Bobby, comes to tell Anita that they've identified the guys that were following her hanging out around the circus. At some point while they're talking about what to do about the guys, Anita monologues about how she thinks it's a myth that the Amazons cut off a breast, and that it's a male conspiracy. Way to make your feminism borderline crazy. After a lot of useless, they catch the bad guys in a completely ridiculous setup. But the cops show, and Anita has to wave her badge around to keep everybody out of trouble. They take the men and Anita's crew down to the station. Anita waits around trying to find out who was following her, and ends up getting grilled by a grouchy female detective. Somewhere in the conversation, we pick up this gem.
I widened eyes at that.
But whose eyes did you widen, Anita? Turns out one of the guys was an internationally wanted spy type. Then Anita finds out that the police have brought in Jason. I would have thought it would have had to do with some of the reckless driving he pulled during the whole being followed, Anita falling in and out of dream states, and a struggle with Belle incident. But of course it's because he's a suspect in the murder case. Anita goes to bail him out and finds out that they suspect him because of the scratches she put on his arms earlier during sex. Anita defends him, and eventually it comes out that there was a second murder which Dolph didn't want her to know about. Dolph spouts a lot of racism against lycanthropes and vampires. He's also convinced that Anita is pregnant, since Tammy came out about her pregnancy, and once again the link is assumed because they were both sick and passed out. He all but calls her a whore, which she may or may not deserve. It's finally revealed that Dolph's son is marrying a vampire and becoming a vampire himself, which causes Dolph's entire purpose in the story, getting angry. Dolph starts to tear stuff up so they get the hell out. Jason tells Anita that he could smell the werewolf at the murder scene and could tell it wasn't from the city. Then Anita proceeds to offend him. When she gets back to the circus, in a conversation with Bobby the Were-Rat about the guy that was following her, she assumes that not knowing the man's name means that Bobby's a white supremacist. Not that it goes anywhere. Then, Jean-Claude and Asher try to apologize to Anita, but all she wants to do is monologue about how pretty they look in their fancy clothing. There's like a page and a half of this. Oh, and I should mention that the only reason the title of the book is Cerulean Sins is because the sheets are cerulean. Or that's the only thing I can think of that makes the title mean anything. Asher gets upset yet again, but eventually Anita kisses both vampires so they can metaphorically kiss and make up, just like they did in the olden days with Asher's human servant. More clothing descriptions and a man with a French braid, the worst of all braids. Jean-Claude reveals his plan to make it look like he has a vast harem of men, because apparently Belmort doesn't see men as a threat to her self-proclaimed title of most desirable in the universe. And therefore somehow she'll forget about Anita. Even Anita thinks this plan is dumb. They're holding some kind of feast in the cavern under the circus. Anita runs away from the party, promptly followed by several others. She finally gets around to explaining what happened with her, Belle, and the Mother of all Darkness.
Belle has called me into some kind of dream when the darkness rose around us.
Grammar errors in a published work, doesn't it just make you giggle? The two child vampires that Musette brought with her torment two of Anita's were-leopards. And eventually, the female child vampire, Valentina, reveals that she too has had a run-in with the Mother of all Darkness. And then...
Valentina looked a question at me.
I don't know either. Anita also seems confused about the definition of the word homophobic. She calls Damien homophobic just because he doesn't want to have sex with men. That word, I don't think you're using it quite right. During the whole standoff caused by the two child vampires tormenting the were-leopards, Musette calls in a couple of Belle's uber-vamp servants to her aid. Anita proceeds to blow up their heads to prove that they're not indestructible. Particularly pissed off by this, Belle decides to possess Musette again. Belle decides she's going to take Asher and starts killing him slowly. This is when Richard shows up with the rest of the werewolves, and boy does his pissy self put them all at risk. After Anita finally gets Richard to stop screwing stuff up, and Asher is very nearly completely dead, Jean-Claude finally grows a pair and stands up to Mommy Dearest. And then somehow creates his own bloodline through some kind of mystical meshing with Anita and, I think, Richard. And as a bonus, they give new life to Asher, forever removing him from the grips of Belmort. So they finally kick Musette and her crew out, except for the two child vampires who want to stay and right their wrongs. For some reason. I guess they weren't that bad after all. After that, Anita gets a call about the next of the murders. Eventually, they track down the werewolf using other werewolves. And Anita kills it. Which ties into the subplot of the terrorists following her, because the werewolf was one of them. And so was that guy from the first chapter we had written off as completely useless. Apparently they needed somebody to raise a ridiculously old zombie, but they needed it to look really nice. But Anita gets disregarded because she's been performing her zombie raising without sacrifices at the request of her witch friend, whose coven says that her sacrifices mess up her karma too. And that means that her zombies don't look pretty. There was also a useless epilogue, which pretty much told you everything you could have gathered from reading the book, and apparently not even all the way to the end, since it seems to only cover up to the creating a whole new bloodline thing.
From even Adam to the atom bomb, here's to all the views ahead and to our zombie prom.
Cerulean Sins is, in a word, painful. There's too much useless information and not enough of what might have made the book good. Yet, I did satisfy my sick curiosity about just how bad the Anita Blake Vampire Hunter novels are. They deserve every beating they get. So, how can I follow up this catastrophe? Well, I had heard about an upcoming release, and when I walked by the display, I couldn't help picking up Glee, the beginning. That's next time on Let's Read with LabbyDragon.
Here's to us, here's to us, here's to all we have in store. Here's to you, here's to me, you made my life worth living for. From even Adam to the atom bomb, here's to all the views ahead and to our zombie prom.
When I was a little girl, I used to fantasize. Satin dress and satin gloves, mascara on my big brown eyes. Life was perfect in that world, pretty as you please. Now I see dreams are dreams, here's to real life fantasies.
When I was a little boy, my dream